The morning of February 23, 2014, started like any other for Mike Peterson, a maintenance supervisor at Glacier National Park. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, the kind that makes the Montana wilderness look like an untouched canvas. Mike was checking the remote access roads near Lake McDonald, making sure they were passable for emergency vehicles. It was routine work, the kind he'd done 100 times before. At 7:43 a.m., something caught his eye. A car, partially visible through the tree line, about 50 yards off the service road. It wasn't unusual to find abandoned vehicles in winter. People underestimated Montana weather all the time, got stuck, and hiked out for help. But something about this felt different. Wrong. Mike trudged through the knee-deep snow, his breath forming clouds in the minus 15-degree air. As he got closer, his stomach tightened. The car was a blue 2011 Honda CR-V, covered in a thick layer of snow and ice. It had been there for days, maybe weeks. The windows were fogged from the inside, impossible to see through. He brushed snow off the license plate with his gloved hand. Montana plates. He'd call it in, get it towed. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The driver's door wasn't fully closed, just slightly ajar, like someone had tried to shut it, but didn't have the strength to latch it completely. Mike pulled the door open. The interior light didn't come on. The battery was long dead. But even in the dim morning light filtering through the frosted windows, he could see the car seats. 3 of them. An infant carrier in the back. A booster seat. A regular car seat. All empty. All with their straps still buckled, as if the occupants had simply vanished. On the floor of the passenger side, he spotted a purse, frozen solid. A phone on the dashboard, screen cracked, covered in ice. In the cup holder, a baby bottle with frozen formula. Mike's hands were shaking now, and not from the cold. He backed away from the vehicle, pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Mike Peterson at mile marker 31 on Lake Road. I need law enforcement here immediately." His voice cracked. "I found an abandoned vehicle with signs of, just get someone here now." The dispatcher asked him to clarify. Mike stared at the empty car seats, at the belongings left behind, at the vastness of the Montana wilderness stretching endlessly in every direction. "It's a family car," he said quietly. "Child seats, baby stuff, but there's nobody here. They're gone." Within an hour, the quiet service road was swarming with vehicles. Park rangers, Flathead County Sheriff's deputies, Montana Highway Patrol. Yellow tape surrounded the Honda. Investigators photographed every angle, documented every detail. The car was registered to Rebecca Chen Williams, 34, from Kalispell. Married to David Williams, 36. Parents to Emma, 7, and baby Noah, 11 months old. The search began immediately. K-9 units, helicopters, dozens of volunteers combing through the forest. The temperature had dropped to minus 20 the week before. If the family had wandered into the woods, if they'd gotten lost, if they'd been out there for days in those conditions, nobody wanted to finish that thought. But as hours turned into days and days into weeks, the Chen Williams family remained missing. No bodies, no trail, no explanation. Just an abandoned car in the wilderness and a family that had seemingly evaporated into the frozen Montana air. The case would haunt the community for a decade. Theories would multiply. Hope would fade. Until last month, when a single phone call changed everything. Before we dive deeper into what happened to the Chen Williams family, I need to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. Montana folks, have you heard about this case? And everyone else, what time is it where you are? I'm genuinely curious if you're watching this in the middle of the day, or if you're like me, unable to sleep, diving into these mysteries at 2 a.m. If this story already has you hooked, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're about to go deep into one of Montana's most baffling disappearances, and trust me, the resolution will leave you speechless. To understand what happened to the Chen Williams family, you need to understand who they were before they vanished. Rebecca Chen Williams was brilliant, the kind of person who seemed to excel at everything she touched. Born in Seattle to Taiwanese immigrant parents, she'd graduated valedictorian from her high school, earned a full scholarship to University of Washington, and completed her pediatric residency at Seattle Children's Hospital. She met David Williams at a medical conference in 2005. He was presenting a paper on rural health care access, something that had become his passion after growing up in small-town Montana, where the nearest hospital was 2 hours away. David was opposite to Rebecca in many ways, where she was precise and methodical. He was intuitive and spontaneous. Where she thrived in cities, he longed for open spaces. But somehow, they balanced each other perfectly. They married in 2006, a beautiful ceremony that blended Rebecca's family traditions with David's Montana roots. When David was offered a position establishing a rural health clinic in Kalispell, Rebecca surprised everyone by saying yes immediately. She'd fallen in love with Montana during their visits to David's family. The mountains, the quiet, the sense of community, it all appealed to her in ways that shocked her Seattle friends. Emma was born in 2007, a bright, curious child who inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's adventurous spirit. She was reading by age 4, skiing by 5, and constantly asking questions that challenged even her doctor parents. Rebecca often joked that Emma would either become a Supreme Court justice or a wilderness guide, possibly both. The family settled into Kalispell life beautifully. David's clinic was thriving, providing essential services to rural communities that had been underserved for decades. Rebecca joined the pediatric unit at Kalispell Regional Medical Center, quickly becoming beloved by both colleagues and patients. They bought a craftsman-style house on the edge of town, with views of the mountains and a backyard that seemed to stretch forever. When Noah arrived in March 2013, their family felt complete. He was an easy baby, all smiles and contentment, sleeping through the night at just 8 weeks old. Emma adored her little brother, constantly wanting to help with feedings and diaper changes, reading him stories, even though he was too young to understand. By February 2014, life was good, really good. David's clinic had just received a major grant to expand services. Rebecca had been promoted to head of pediatric emergency care. Emma was thriving in 2nd grade, and Noah was hitting all his developmental milestones early. They had plans: a summer vacation to visit Rebecca's parents in Seattle, Emma's first overnight camping trip, maybe another baby in a year or 2. Friends described them as the kind of family that made parenting look easy, though Rebecca would laugh at that. "You should see us at 6 a.m. on a Monday," she'd say. "It's barely controlled chaos." But even their chaos seemed charmed. They were involved in everything. David coached Emma's soccer team. Rebecca volunteered at the library's reading program. They hosted dinner parties that became legendary among their friend group. The weekend of February 22nd was supposed to be special. It was David's parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and there was a big celebration planned at their ranch near Whitefish. The whole family was coming. David's 3 siblings, their kids, cousins from Oregon. Emma had been practicing a song on her violin for weeks to perform for her grandparents. But on the morning of Saturday, February 22nd, Rebecca called David's mother. Noah had developed a fever overnight. Nothing serious, but enough that Rebecca wanted to keep him home. "We'll drive up tomorrow if he's feeling better," she promised. "Save us some cake." According to phone records, that was the last call made from Rebecca's phone. The last time anyone in the family heard their voices. The last confirmation that the Chen Williams family was alive and safe in their Kalispell home. What happened in the next 24 hours remains one of Montana's most puzzling mysteries. The investigation into the Chen Williams disappearance was immediate and massive. Detective Sarah Hendricks of the Flathead County Sheriff's Office took lead. She'd worked missing persons before, but never anything like this. An entire family doesn't just vanish. The timeline, as investigators pieced it together, was frustratingly sparse. Saturday morning, 9:15 a.m., Rebecca calls David's mother about Noah's fever. Saturday afternoon, a neighbor recalls seeing David's truck in the driveway around 2 p.m. Saturday evening, no activity, no phone calls, no credit card usage. Sunday, nothing. Complete silence. The Honda CR-V was found Monday morning, but forensics suggested it had been there since at least Saturday night. Snow patterns, ice formation on the windows, the amount of snow accumulated on the hood, all of it pointed to the car being abandoned sometime Saturday evening or early Sunday morning. Inside the vehicle, investigators found disturbing details. Rebecca's purse contained her wallet, credit cards, and driver's license. Everything she'd need if she was planning to go somewhere. David's phone was wedged between the driver's seat and center console. Emma's beloved stuffed rabbit, the one she never went anywhere without, was on the floor of the back seat. The infant car seat showed signs that Noah had been in it recently. A pacifier was still clipped to his seat strap. Formula stains on the fabric looked fresh, or as fresh as anything could look after being frozen for 36 hours. But where were they? The search expanded rapidly. Ground teams covered a 5-mile radius from the abandoned car. Dog teams tracked what seemed to be a trail leading away from the vehicle, but it ended abruptly about 100 yards into the forest. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew grid patterns for days, looking for any heat signatures. Dive teams even searched Lake McDonald, though the ice was thick enough that entry would have been nearly impossible. The family's home in Kalispell offered more questions than answers. Everything seemed normal, eerily so. Breakfast dishes in the sink. Emma's homework on the kitchen table, half completed. Noah's bouncy chair in the living room with toys scattered around it. The beds were unmade, suggesting they'd gotten up Saturday morning and started their day as usual. But certain things were missing. The diaper bag Rebecca always carried, David's wallet, Emma's pink winter coat, the one with the faux fur hood she insisted on wearing everywhere. These absences suggested the family had left intentionally, planning to go somewhere. But where? And why end up on a remote service road in Glacier National Park? Investigators checked everything. Security footage from every camera in Kalispell, the family's financials, their emails, texts, social media, David's clinic records, Rebecca's patient files. They interviewed hundreds of people, colleagues, friends, neighbors, even casual acquaintances. The picture that emerged was of a normal, happy family with no obvious problems, no financial troubles. They had healthy savings and no significant debt. No marital issues. Friends described them as still very much in love. No custody disputes, no stalkers, no threats. David had no gambling problems. Rebecca had no secret life. Emma was a happy, well-adjusted child. Even Noah's pediatrician confirmed he was healthy and developing normally. Detective Hendricks was stumped. In her experience, when families disappeared, there was always something. Domestic violence, financial pressure, custody battles, mental health crises. But the Chen Williams family seemed to have had none of that. They'd simply vanished into the Montana wilderness without explanation. The community rallied. Search parties were organized daily for weeks. A Facebook group called Find the Chen Williams Family gained 50,000 members. A $100,000 reward was offered for information. David's clinic colleagues kept his practice running, hoping he'd return. Rebecca's hospital held her position for months. But as winter turned to spring and spring to summer, hope faded. The official search was called off in May, though volunteers continued looking. The case remained open, but inactive. Detective Hendricks kept the file on her desk, reading through it obsessively, looking for something she'd missed. Theories proliferated online. Some thought the family had witnessed something they shouldn't have and entered witness protection. Others believed they'd been murdered and their bodies hidden somewhere in the vast Montana wilderness. Wild animal attack was suggested and dismissed. No blood in the car, no signs of struggle. Alien abduction was proposed by the fringe elements. Every theory had its believers, but none had evidence. As 2014 ended, the Chen Williams case went cold. Their house sat empty, mortgage paid by automatic withdrawal from their bank account. Emma's school held her spot for a year before finally, reluctantly, clearing out her desk. David's patients were transferred to other doctors. Life in Kalispell moved on, but the mystery remained. Where had they gone? What had happened on that service road? Were they still alive somewhere? These questions haunted everyone who'd known them, especially Detective Hendricks, who'd made the case personal in a way that wasn't entirely professional, but was entirely human. Montana is unforgiving country. Beautiful, yes. Majestic, absolutely. But also vast, wild, and capable of swallowing people whole without a trace. Between 2010 and 2020, northwestern Montana saw dozens of missing persons cases, more than statistically expected for the population size. Some were explained easily enough. Hikers who underestimated the terrain, hunters who got turned around in snowstorms, elderly individuals with dementia who wandered off. Most were found within days, sometimes alive, sometimes not. But a disturbing number remained unsolved. The Chen Williams case became part of a larger pattern that investigators called the Montana Triangle, an area roughly bounded by Kalispell, Whitefish, and West Glacier, where an unusual number of disappearances occurred. Rational explanations existed. It was a tourist area with challenging terrain, changing weather, and millions of acres of wilderness. People got lost. Accidents happened. But some cases defied easy explanation. Like the Chen Williams family, these weren't inexperienced tourists or reckless adventurers. They were locals who knew the area, prepared individuals who shouldn't have vanished, families whose disappearances made no logical sense. Take the Morrison case from 2011. A family of 4 heading to a cabin for the weekend never arrived. Their truck was found 2 weeks later in a ravine, but the bodies were never recovered. Or Jennifer Huang, a park ranger who disappeared in 2016 during a routine patrol. Her equipment was found neatly arranged by a trail, but she was gone. Online communities developed elaborate theories. Some blamed serial killers using the wilderness as hunting grounds. Others suggested human trafficking rings, though the victims didn't fit typical profiles. The most extreme proposed everything from Bigfoot to government conspiracies. Local law enforcement dismissed these theories publicly, while privately acknowledging that something unusual was happening. Detective Hendricks noticed patterns. Many disappearances occurred in February or March, when weather was harsh but not impossible. Families were overrepresented. Single individuals who vanished got less attention, but might have been part of the same phenomenon. Most vehicles were found on or near service roads, places locals knew, but tourists wouldn't. She created a database, tracking every detail: times, locations, weather conditions, victim profiles. She collaborated with other departments, the FBI, even reached out to Canadian authorities, since some disappearances occurred near the border. But patterns without explanations are just coincidences, and that's all she had. The Chen Williams case stood out even among these mysteries. The intact car seats, the organized abandonment of the vehicle, the complete absence of bodies despite extensive searching. It suggested something deliberate rather than accidental, planned rather than spontaneous. As years passed, the case became legendary in true crime circles. Podcasts devoted episodes to it. Amateur detectives arrived every summer to conduct their own searches. Books were written, documentaries filmed. The Chen Williams family became famous in the worst possible way, as a mystery rather than as people. David's parents aged rapidly, the not knowing worse than any definitive bad news could have been. They kept Emma's room exactly as she'd left it during her last visit. Rebecca's parents flew in from Seattle every February, standing vigil at the spot where the car was found. They brought flowers that froze instantly in the winter air, temporary memorials to a permanent absence. The community, too, was changed. Parents held their children tighter. Families stopped taking remote roads, even ones they'd driven for years. The mountains that had once seemed protective now felt threatening. The beauty remained, but it was tinged with unease. Some people moved away, unable to reconcile the paradise they'd chosen with the reality of unexplained disappearances. Others became obsessed, joining search parties for any missing person, as if finding someone else might somehow bring back the families already lost. The local economy, dependent on tourism, took a hit as stories of the Montana Triangle spread online. But life, as it does, continued. New families moved to Kalispell, unaware of the history. Children were born who would never know a time when the Chen Williams family wasn't missing. The acute grief became chronic sadness. The active search became passive waiting. Detective Hendricks was promoted, then promoted again. But she never forgot the case. She kept copies of the files at home, reviewing them on weekends, on holidays, whenever insomnia struck. She attended trainings on new investigative techniques, always hoping something would apply to this case. She corresponded with experts worldwide, anyone who might offer fresh perspective. In 2019, she thought she had a breakthrough when new DNA technology became available. She had the car reprocessed, looking for trace evidence that might have been missed. But there was nothing unexpected, just DNA from the family, exactly where you'd expect it to be. No signs of struggle, no evidence of anyone else. The 10-year anniversary in 2024 was approaching. Local media was planning retrospectives. The Facebook group, still active with 200,000 members, was organizing a massive search. Detective Hendricks, now Captain Hendricks, was preparing to give the same statement she'd given every year. The case remains open. We continue to investigate all leads. Then, on October 15th, 2024, her phone rang. Quick interruption. If you're as deep into this as I am, share this video right now. Cases like this need attention. They need fresh eyes. You never know who might have that one crucial piece of information. Also, drop a comment telling me what you think happened. I've read every theory, and I'm still not sure. What's your gut telling you? The call came from Tom Novak, a contractor doing renovation work on an old hunting property about 60 miles northeast of where the car had been found. The property had been in foreclosure for years, tied up in legal battles after the owner, a reclusive man named Eugene Marsh, died in 2019 without clear heirs. Tom's crew was gutting the main structure when they found something odd. A hidden room behind what looked like a tool closet. Not just a room, a fully furnished living space with beds, a kitchenette, even a bathroom. It looked like someone had been living there, though not recently. Everything was covered in dust and showing signs of abandonment. But it was what they found in that room that made Tom call the police. Children's drawings stuck to a makeshift refrigerator, dated 2014, 2015, 2016. Signed Emma. Mathematical equations on notebook paper, the kind a doctor might write, medical terminology, and photographs, a family of 4, taken with an old Polaroid camera. The quality was poor, the faces somewhat obscured, but Tom recognized them from the old news coverage he'd seen. It looked like the Chen Williams family. Captain Hendricks arrived within an hour, bringing a full forensics team. The property was massive, 200 acres of dense forest with multiple outbuildings. Eugene Marsh had been known as an eccentric, a survivalist who'd inherited the land from his father and lived there alone since the 1980s. He'd had run-ins with local law enforcement over the years, minor stuff like illegal hunting, building without permits, but nothing serious. The hidden room told a disturbing story. It was actually a series of rooms, almost an apartment, built into what had been a large basement. The construction was sophisticated, soundproofing, ventilation, plumbing that connected to the main house, but could be shut off independently. This wasn't improvised. It had been planned and built over time. The forensics team found DNA evidence immediately. Hair on pillowcases, toothbrushes in the bathroom, clothing in dresser drawers. It would take time to process, but Hendricks knew what they'd find. The Chen Williams family had been here. They'd lived here. But where were they now? The search of the property took weeks. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, excavation equipment. Every outbuilding was searched. Every unusual patch of ground investigated. The fear was that they'd find 4 bodies, that Eugene Marsh had kept the family captive and then killed them before his own death in 2019. But they found something else entirely. In Marsh's main house, investigators discovered thousands of pages of writings, journals, manifestos, elaborate plans. Marsh had believed that society was on the verge of collapse. He'd been preparing for decades, stockpiling food, weapons, medical supplies. But more than that, he'd been planning to save certain people he deemed worthy of surviving the apocalypse. The writings revealed an obsession with David Williams. Marsh had been a patient at David's clinic, treated for diabetes and hypertension. He'd interpreted David's kindness as a sign, a divine indication that David and his family were chosen. The writings grew increasingly delusional, describing visions, prophecies, a great calling to preserve the pure families before the end times. February 22, 2014, featured prominently in the journals. Marsh had been watching the family, knew about the anniversary party, knew they'd be traveling. He'd created what he called a rescue scenario. The details were vague, but it seemed he'd somehow intercepted them, convinced or forced them to come to his property. The journals from 2014-2016 described daily life with the saved family, teaching Emma mathematics and survival skills, caring for baby Noah. Long discussions with David and Rebecca about medicine and preparedness. It was deeply unsettling. Marsh seemed to believe they were willing participants in his delusion, a happy extended family, preparing for apocalypse together. Then the entries stopped abruptly in late 2016. Investigators found evidence of a fire in one of the outbuildings, old burn marks suggesting something had happened years ago. They found more children's items scattered throughout the property, toys that would have been age-appropriate for Emma and Noah as they grew. They found medical supplies that had been used, medications with David's clinic's labels, but still no bodies, no indication of where the family had gone. Then came the breakthrough. Hidden in Marsh's bedroom, behind a false panel, investigators found a second set of journals. These told a different story. The family had tried to escape multiple times. Marsh had become increasingly paranoid, violent. The happy family narrative of the first journals was a fantasy. The reality was captivity, control, fear. The final entry, dated November 2016, was chilling. They got away 3 days ago, took the truck while I was in town. I searched, but the snow covered their tracks. God will bring them back or punish them for their ingratitude. I am patient. I am righteous. They belong here. But if the family had escaped in 2016, where were they? Why hadn't they contacted anyone? Why hadn't they come home? The answer came from an unexpected source. Following the news coverage of the discovery at Marsh's property, a woman in North Dakota contacted authorities. She ran a domestic violence shelter in Minot, about 500 miles from Kalispell. She remembered a family arriving in November 2016, a couple with 2 children, seeking shelter, terrified, refusing to give their real names. They'd stayed for 3 weeks, then vanished one night, leaving a note thanking the shelter, but saying they had to keep moving. The woman had kept the note. The handwriting was analyzed. It matched Rebecca Chen Williams' writing. The truth about what happened to the Chen Williams family after their escape was pieced together slowly, through fragments of evidence across multiple states. They'd been running, convinced Marsh would find them, traumatized by nearly 3 years of captivity. They'd moved through the Underground Railroad of domestic violence shelters, using false names, paying cash, avoiding anywhere that might require identification. The trauma of their captivity had convinced them that Marsh had connections everywhere, that returning to their old life would put them and others in danger. David had worked day labor when he could. Rebecca had used her medical knowledge for under-the-table work at free clinics. They'd homeschooled Emma, tried to give Noah as normal a childhood as possible while living in the shadows. They'd been in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, never staying anywhere more than a few months. The tragic irony was that Eugene Marsh had died in 2019, 3 years after their escape. He'd had a heart attack alone on his property, undiscovered for weeks. If the family had known, they might have come home years ago. But living off the grid, they'd had no way of knowing their captor was dead. The search intensified. Federal agencies joined the effort. The family's photos were recirculated. Age-progressed images of Emma and Noah were created. The message was clear. It's safe to come home. On November 8, 2024, 3 weeks after the discovery at Marsh's property, Captain Hendricks received another call. A family had walked into a police station in Billings, Montana. They wanted to come home. The reunion was private, away from media cameras. David was grayer, thinner, his hands shaking slightly from untreated diabetes. Rebecca had aged more than the decade should have accounted for, her eyes holding a wariness that hadn't been there before. Emma, now 17, stood protective near her mother, a young woman who'd lost her childhood to years of captivity and running. Noah, 11, had no memory of any life before running, no memory of the captivity, no memory of Eugene Marsh. They were alive. They were together. They were finally safe. The medical evaluations revealed the extent of their ordeal: malnutrition during the captivity years, PTSD across the board. Emma had gaps in her education despite her parents' best efforts. Noah had attachment issues, anxiety around strangers. David needed immediate medical attention for complications from untreated chronic conditions. Rebecca struggled with hypervigilance, unable to sleep, constantly checking locks and windows. But they were alive. The community's reaction was overwhelming. Joy that the family had survived. Horror at what they'd endured. Anger that Eugene Marsh had never faced justice. Questions about how this could have happened. How one man could make an entire family disappear for a decade. The investigation into Marsh revealed more disturbing details. He'd had the property since the 1970s, plenty of time to build his underground rooms. There was evidence suggesting the Chen Williams family might not have been his first captives, though no other victims were identified definitively. He'd been intelligent, careful, choosing a family new to the area, with out-of-state relatives who wouldn't immediately raise alarms. The legal aftermath was complex. Eugene Marsh was dead, so there would be no trial, no opportunity for the family to face their captor in court. His estate, what little remained, was awarded to the family in civil proceedings, though they wanted nothing from it. The property was eventually demolished, the land returning to wilderness. The family's reintegration into society was gradual and painful. David couldn't return to medicine immediately. Too much had changed. His licenses had lapsed. His hands weren't steady enough for procedures. Rebecca took a position doing medical research, something that didn't require patient interaction. Emma struggled in traditional school, eventually opting for online education. Noah received intensive therapy, slowly learning to trust a world beyond his family. They didn't return to their old house in Kalispell. Too many memories, too much attention. They relocated to a different part of Montana, somewhere quiet, somewhere they could heal. Their names were changed legally, giving them a fresh start. though those who needed to know were informed. Captain Hendricks visited them once, 6 months after their return. They were doing better. David was receiving treatment, his health improving. Rebecca was sleeping through some nights. Emma had been accepted to college, planning to study psychology, wanting to help other trauma survivors. Noah had joined a soccer team, making friends, being a normal kid for the first time in his memory. They were healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing. What does justice look like when the perpetrator is already dead? When the victims survived but lost a decade of their lives? When children grew up in captivity and fear? There's no clean answer, no satisfying resolution. Eugene Marsh never faced trial, never had to answer for what he did. His death was quick, a heart attack, while the family he'd terrorized suffered for years. Some would say he got away with it. Others would point out that he died alone, his delusions unfulfilled, his captives having escaped. The case changed how Montana law enforcement approaches missing families. New protocols were established for searching remote properties. Better databases were created to track individuals like Marsh, who exhibited concerning behaviors. Training was implemented on recognizing signs of captivity and coercion. But systemic changes don't erase individual trauma. The Chen Williams family, now living under a different name, bears scars that will never fully heal. They survived something that should have killed them, kept their family intact through unimaginable circumstances. That's heroic, but it came at a cost that can't be calculated. The other families still missing in Montana took both hope and horror from this case. Hope that their loved ones might still be alive somewhere. Horror at what that survival might mean. Searches of other remote properties were conducted, but no other captives were found. The other disappearances remained mysteries. For the Kalispell community, the case's resolution brought a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the family was alive. Guilt that they'd been so close for 3 years without anyone knowing. Fear about what other secrets might be hidden in the Montana wilderness. The town held a private gathering. Not a celebration, exactly, but an acknowledgement. Funds were raised for the family's ongoing medical and psychological care. The national response focused on the survival aspect. How had they endured? How had they escaped? How had they stayed hidden for so long? The family declined all interview requests, all book deals, all documentary offers. Their story had been public for a decade. Now they wanted privacy. Online, the case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation, the vulnerability of families, the ways that one person's delusions can destroy multiple lives. But it also became a story of resilience, of a family that refused to be separated, parents who protected their children, even in captivity, children who survived and grew despite trauma. Captain Hendricks retired in 2025. The Chen Williams case, her final major investigation. In her farewell speech, she said, "We found them. After 10 years, we brought them home. It's not the ending we wanted. We wanted them to never have suffered at all. But they're alive. They're together. And they're healing. Sometimes that's the best resolution we can hope for." She was right. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't justice in any traditional sense. But it was an ending. And for a family that had been frozen in time for a decade, that was enough to begin moving forward. If this story moved you, please share it. These aren't just cases. They're families. They're real people who deserve to be remembered as more than mysteries. Subscribe for more deep dives into cases that need to be told, stories that need to be heard. Before you go, leave a comment. What would justice have looked like in this case? Can there be closure when so much was stolen? And for those of you in Montana or similar remote areas, has this changed how you think about safety and community? Thanks for watching, for caring about the Chen Williams family, and for remembering that sometimes survival itself is a form of justice. The Chen Williams family survived. They lost a decade, years of birthdays, holidays, normal childhood experiences, career advancement, time with extended family. Emma lost the chance to be a regular kid. Noah never knew normal until he was 11. David and Rebecca lost the prime years of their careers, their health, their sense of safety. But they survived together. Eugene Marsh died alone, his delusions unfulfilled, his saved family having escaped. He spent his final 3 years searching for people who were running from him, never knowing they were free, never getting to control them again. There's a kind of justice in that, imperfect, unsatisfying, but real. The hidden rooms at his property were demolished in 2025. The land was donated to Glacier National Park, returning to wilderness, erasing the last physical evidence of what happened there. Nature reclaimed it quickly. Within a year, you couldn't tell buildings had ever stood there. The family, under their new identities, slowly built new lives. David returned to medicine part-time, working with trauma survivors. Rebecca became an advocate for missing persons cases, though always behind the scenes, never publicly. Emma started college, studying psychology with a focus on captivity trauma. Noah, remarkably, emerged as the least affected, young enough during the captivity to not fully remember it, adaptable enough to embrace normal life. They stayed in Montana. Despite everything, it was home. The mountains that had hidden their captivity also offered healing. The wilderness that had swallowed them for a decade became a place of recovery. They hiked, carefully, always together, always with GPS and emergency beacons, reclaiming the landscape that had been used against them. Other families of missing persons reached out, seeking hope, seeking commonality. The Chen Williams family helped when they could, privately, quietly. They understood the agony of not knowing, the relief of resolution, even when that resolution was painful. In 2026, Emma gave a single, anonymous interview to help other survivors. She said, "We survived because we had each other. My parents never stopped protecting us, never stopped being parents, even when they couldn't protect themselves. My brother and I knew we were loved every single day, even the worst days. That's what got us through, knowing that this wasn't normal, wasn't right, wasn't forever. Love was our resistance." The case files remain open. Technically, there's always the possibility that other victims might be discovered. Other properties connected to Marsh might surface. But actively, it's over. The Chen Williams family was found. They came home. They lived. That's more than most missing persons cases can say. It's not enough. Nothing could be enough to compensate for what was taken. But it's something. In a world where families vanish and never return, where mysteries remain unsolved forever, where justice is often just a word we use when we can't fix what's broken, sometimes surviving has to be enough. Sometimes coming home after a decade is the best ending you can hope for. Sometimes being together is its own form of justice. Rest in peace to all the families still missing. Strength to those still searching. Hope to those who've given up hope. And to the Chen Williams family, wherever you are now, under whatever names you've chosen, you survived. You're together. That matters. That's everything. The Montana wilderness keeps its secrets, but sometimes, just sometimes, it gives them back.